Yeah? Sorry? Oh, we're live? Not yet. Oh. I am so sorry. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're watching us from. And welcome to the South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum. Our discussion today is based on 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And this is the 78th panel discussion of this forum. I would like to welcome all our discussants, Susie, Wal, and Amer. You will have to excuse our fourth discussant will not be able to attend this discussion due to unavoidable circumstances. So I'm going to go right into introducing our topic for today. So 16 days of activism against gender-based violence is an international campaign that is celebrated annually from November 25th to December 10th. This initiative was started by a group of activists at the inaugural Women's Global Leadership Institution in 1991. So ever since then, individuals, organizations, and institutions around the world call for the prevention and elimination of violence against women and girls. The global theme for this year is Orange the World, End Violence Against Women and Girls Now. And our national theme is Take Action, Be Accountable, End Violence Against Women and Girls. In South Sudan, over 65% of women and girls have experienced physical and sexual violence in their lifetime. In 2020 alone, over 488 cases of gender-based violence was reported to Juba Teaching Hospital. This is because gender-based violence is openly condoned in our communities, and this manifests in the form of domestic violence and forced marriage, among others. In recent years, especially with the outbreak of the 2013 and 2014 conflict and crisis, violence, especially sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls, has been used as a military strategy by both sides to the conflict. I'll go on to introduce our panelists, and I'll start with Amer. Amer, you're welcome. Amer is a graduate from Daystar University. She has a bachelor's degree in community development and a minor in counseling psychology. She is a social worker with Crown the Woman South Sudan. She offers counseling and psychosocial support to survivors of GBV. Our next discussant is Wal Athoy. Wal is currently the program officer. This is Ending Violence Against Women at UN Women. He holds a master's degree in Peace and Development Studies at the University of Juba. Apart from his work with UN Women, Wal is a renowned researcher on conflict, peace, and development issues. He has written documents around identity politics and gender equality. Our next discussant is Susan. Sorry. Yes. Susan is an ambitious South Sudanese lawyer whose focus is mainly on ensuring the achievement of sustainable development, gender equality, as well as justice for all in South Sudan, Africa, and at a global scale. Susan holds a bachelor's degree in law, as well as a postgraduate diploma in law. These qualifications are further enhanced by her master's in human rights law and she has a second master's in business administration. She has over 7 years of experience in the legal field, food assistance, programs, access to justice, women empowerment, banking, and telecommunication industries. Susan draws this from a set of diverse educational and professional experience. And she loves to promote human rights with a focus on women economic, social, and political rights. So that's it about our discussions for today. I would like to jump directly into our first question. And our first question is going to Amer. Amer, can you hear me?
Yes, Igal, I can hear you.
Okay. Now, please help us to understand what is gender-based violence, sexual gender-based violence, and what are some of the factors contributing to gender-based violence in South Sudan?
Thank you so much, Igale, for the question, and to the rest of the team. I'm glad to be here with you. Um, as you have heard, my name is Amer. Okay, when we talk of gender-based violence, we come to think of the as an act that is a human rights violation. Actually, it's an act that is perpetrated on the other person against their will. They don't have a consent over it. So it is something that enforced on someone that is harmful and is affecting their rights as a person. And when you look at sexual gender-based violence, mostly this happen in the areas of conflicts when let's say there are community conflicts and communal conflicts and all these things. You see women, girls, men, boys are being used as a weapon of war, so you see issues of rape come up, to anger the other people, so sexual gender-based violence almost is the same as gender-based violence, but this other part, there is sexual issues like that are too much into it. And she said, like, when we look at the sex refer to biological determinant and a fixed difference between male and female. And when we look at gender, it's something socially and economically, culturally and politically enforced on people because of their responsibilities, and it differ. So how you define gender in South Sudan might not be how you define gender in the other area, but these are the opportunities and responsibilities that are accorded to us because of the community or the area where we come from. So where you see when someone says that my gender is this, so someone we define gender differently, send it where we come from. Yeah, that's what I can add on that. So when you look at type of gender-based violence, there are many. Gender-based violence is broad. So mostly we think of gender-based violence as issues of women, what is affecting women, but it's all of us, men and women. So you look at the physical violence, that's issues of beating someone, just because, like they're weaker sex than you hit someone, mostly domestic violence. You look at the issues of harmful traditional practices. This is another type of gender-based violence, and sexual harassment. Calling people names, and even economic social violence. Also another type of gender-based violence where people are denied resources and things that are affecting them. So. How can we support or how can we, the consequences of gender-based violence? This is something that take lives. Gender-based violence, when it's happened to people, you hear issues of death, community conflicts, and so many things come up when gender-based violence is rampant and is not taken care of well. I think that's what you have asked, Igale, if I'm not wrong.
I can't hear. Did I miss something?
I
Me
forgot
too,
to
I
unmute.
can
So
hear you.
sorry. Sorry about that. Amer, I was saying the first instant, I needed you to define what GBV is, which you've already done. Secondly, now I need you to give me the contributing factors, the factors that contribute to gender-based violence in our societies and communities. What are those factors?
According to me, Gale, and the rest of the team, GVV happen mostly in our communities where we stay. And the factors that contribute to this are issues of power. Who is stronger than who? And who can control someone? The issues of power and controls come in. These are the leading issues of gender-based violence. That's why you see GVV is being connected to women because they are the weaker sex. So the stronger sex, the male dominant, take control. You have no right over your body. So someone can decide to marry you off. There's rape cases happen, and physical violence and intimate violence where like there is rape in the family because someone has responsibility over you and someone is stronger than you. That is one thing that causes gender-based violence. I think the second thing I can take, apart from control, the people who are living, let's say, with disability, and those one who are affected, maybe who are born like that. So these people are vulnerable to GBV. Why? Because they're exposed because they don't have right over their bodies and a lot of things. So I think that's what I can add on that.
Thank you very much, Amer, for those factors you've mentioned. I remember when we were growing up in Juba here, it's like our brothers were made our custodians, which is not a bad thing. Your brothers are naturally supposed to protect you. But when it comes to the sense that you go out of the house without their permission, you come back, they're going to beat you, and it's like the parents, our parents used to like give them that authority over you. They see you standing with the neighbor's boy outside the house, they're going to beat you. Huh? You go, you're sent to the market, you come back late, they're going to beat you. So I feel this thing is inbuilt in the way communities have been bringing, whether as in the community has been bringing us up, and I feel our communities actually condone this because I feel that there's a better way to discipline people rather than just inflicting harm on somebody. Yes.
Uh,
So the next question is going to Susie. Um, what steps in form of laws, policies, strategies have been put in place to criminalize and hold accountable perpetrators of GBV and SGBV in South Sudan? And how relevant are these laws in this? I would say we're in an emergency and humanitarian context. So, how relevant are these laws? Are they being efficient?
Thanks a lot for the opportunity. So I'll just dig right into it. So currently, as we speak, in dealing with both SGBV and GBV, we have legislation in form of our penal code, which caters for some of the crimes that are committed, such as, let's say, assault. It's catered for under the penal code. Rape is catered for under the penal code. Forcing somebody detaining someone with the intention of having a sexual relation with them is a crime. It's also provided for under the penal code. Allowing children to participate in prostitution or exposing them to some kind of sexual contact, which is also a form of violence against them, is also catered for under the penal code. So most of these crimes are physical in nature, and they are catered for under the under the penal code. Our issue is now dealing with GBV related situations that are not covered under 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 the law. When we talk about economic, social discrimination, that's not very much factored under the law. Although we are moving towards affirmative action, where we've seen that in the revitalized peace agreement, and we women were given 35% in terms of representation. When it stems down into the family level, where most of the violence or most of the GBV tends to happen, and in a society when most of the incidences of GBV tend to happen, we do not have a solid legal framework that deals with such. So presently, when we talk about GBV, people think we are talking about the physical or the ones that we can easily see. Or somebody has been raped, that's gender-based violence. Or somebody has been battered by the husband, that's gender-based violence. Or a boy has been sodomized, that's gender-based violence. Those are physical. Those are things that can be seen. What about the economical discrimination? Oh, this lady was working, her husband just stopped her from working all of a sudden. Or somebody just got married and the entire clan has said you have to be a housewife. They take that away from you. How about situations where pregnant women are taken off work? You cannot work in certain roles if you're pregnant. You cannot work in certain roles if you're a woman. There's a lot of discriminatory laws or discriminatory strategies or discriminatory policies that are hovering around. And we find that there is no strong legal framework that deals with such. For example, let's talk about laws that are put in place to hinder discrimination in terms of gender. For example, during recruitment, maybe you have a policy that states that in every person's CV, the gender identity of the applicant is going to be blurred out until such a time that everybody so that everybody is given an equal platform to compete. You see, those are some of the policies that could be put in place to make sure that gender equity is achieved at some point. So when we talk about gender violence and gender-based violence, we should not only focus on sexual, because the sexual is catered for under the penal code, and the survivors and the victims have access to justice. Although this access to justice is limited because of the nature of our judicial system right now, there is some progress that is being made. One of the progress that has been made so far is the inauguration of the GBV court. The GBV court, this was back in 2020. The GBV court became functional, and we have seen a number of cases being tried in these courts. However, the functionality of this court is being affected by the fact that there is a continued preference to settle GBV cases using the customary law framework. So people are so used to handling these cases under the customary law framework and treat this matter as a simple family matter, yet it's the magnitude of the matter is not only to the specific family, to the specific individual, but it cuts across the community, and it grows and becomes a national issue. So we need to now talk or move towards looking into solutions that can motivate people, that can motivate survivors, can motivate victims to go and access this gender-based violence court. This GBV court is based here in Juba. How about let's move and have GBV courts in other states as well, so that victims and survivors can be able to access these courts. So those are some of the strategies that are already in place and can be modified to make sure that when handling GBV cases, we not only look at the sexual aspects, but we also look at the social aspects. So it needs a lot of affirmative action. We need a lot of sensitization to be done in our communities. We need a lot of education, girl-child empowerment, so that we can move from having a society where women are vandalized or where men are not are excluded. So we've been having these arguments that are coming across that, well, as we talk about women empowerment, we are also secluding the boy child from this empowerment. That is not the intention of women empowerment. That is not the intention of gender equity. Gender equity is to provide us with an equal platform. So we are not sidelining boys. We need boys to come on the table. We need men to be on the table so that we can be able to achieve this. And men are being brought on the table now. You can find that in the nature of the GBV court, for example. It includes both male and female. So let's move towards a society where men do not feel marginalized as well. So if they face any form of GBV, they can also come to the court to seek justice. So if we have to talk about this, we're going to talk about it for hours. So I'm going to stop there. And then as we continue with the discussions, we'll move smoothly towards it. There's something else that was in my question, Veronica. I don't know whether there'll be enough time for me to cover, which involves looking at the policies in terms of it's okay. We'll just talk about it in the next round of questions, unless there is anything that the others want to add on to what I've already said. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie, for that very elaborate answer. Anybody else wants to add to what Susie has said? Okay, no. So the next, I'm moving to Mr. Wall. Wall, what efforts have been put in place to mitigate and prevent GBV and SGBV, and why is it important to focus on prevention mechanisms rather than response? Because what I see being done on a large scale is the response. I am not seeing prevention is really in South Sudan. It's on a very little scale. So if you don't mind, just make us understand that. Why is that happening?
Well, thank you so much, Veronica. I think you managed to bring me to the table. The way my sister was saying, bring men to the table. So yeah, just to reply to your question very quickly, I want to say that there are a number of issues, efforts that have been put in place by the UN and the international organizations. But this cannot be without recognizing the efforts from our government through the Ministry of Gender, Child and Social Welfare. We know that there are quite some challenges, especially on institutional and maybe the capacities around how can the government support humanitarian and international organizations in ensuring that women are empowered and supported. And what efforts should be done? Because there has to be a way forward. Sometimes you wonder whether you start at a certain point as an international organization or as a UN, but you can't do that. You have to have a base from the government. You have to have a strategic plan and a strategic direction from our government. And I think we are doing quite a number of engagement, and with that, I think we are really moving forward. And maybe to narrow it down to exactly to what efforts that are already in place to ensure that prevention is better than cure. Because by the time we realize that women are suffering, many of them will have suffered psychologically, many of them will have suffered emotionally, and some of them actually die. I have one of my aunt who was killed by the husband. You can now see how serious this gender-based violence is. And you wonder whether there are things that are really happening, maybe from development partners or from the government itself. So as we see little progress that is being made by the UN and by the international organizations, I have to spot out some key aspects. One is financing. You cannot say you're fighting GBB without empowering women, without providing finances to the women, and without providing finances to the organizations that are supporting the cause of women. And we have seen that a situation where women are really suffering to get access to resources, because that, to me, that is the worst element of GBB, where you don't have women accessing land. You see women, they don't have access to resources, financial resources. To me, the first and foremost important way is to provide access. And that is what exactly that UN and development partners are trying to do. Currently, there are efforts where women organizations are being supported through fundings to be able to reach out in terms of mobilization, in terms of awareness, in terms of capacity engagement of women. Now we can have a lot of women who can sit on the table, and they do better than men. And this is not just out of the blue. This is from an effort, from an early effort that is being put in place. The second one to me is the advocacy that we are doing. I know it's we cannot say we did a lot and all that, but we are doing enough. We are doing something little. As we speak in this forum, I don't know how many people are following us. Those will be able to get the information, will be able to understand that this is not GBB is not something that can be condoned. And for that matter, there is already a lot of advocacy at the highest level and also at the communal level. And this is something that we can recognize as humanitarian and say how best we can move forward. I think that's a very good effort. Maybe the last area that I want to touch is an area that my sister has already mentioned. Susan. Susan already talked about it. We have seen a little progress in laws and policies. We have a number of laws and we have a number of policies that are trying to fight gender-based violence and then support women empowerment and equality. One of our laws is the Constitution, our Constitution, even though it has some loophole. There are some elements in the Constitution that we think are actually not good enough to empower women. But there are those elements that are really empowering. The penal code, as my sister Susan has mentioned, has provided to where women can actually access justice in a situation where there is rape, there is killing. There are those physical elements of gender-based violence. So I can say those are key elements and progress that I have seen so far. And we will continue to advocate and fight to ensure that women are brought to the same level and as men. And when we speak about women being brought to the same level, we know how hard it is. I'm not talking about Amir, I'm not talking about Susan, I'm not talking about you, Veronica, women who are already empowered. But you go back to the village, go to the village, where you will see a woman who believes that she's not supposed to sit in a chair. The chair is supposed to be for us men alone. How do you bring that woman up to come and sit in the table? I think that should be a very, very clear question. And that goes back to what we do as humanitarian, what we do as government to ensure that we educate and then we introduce the lost self-esteem to our women, because it is affecting all of us. Our mothers, our sisters, but they have that element where you see they don't want to believe that they're the right people in the community. And so I don't want to take a lot of time. I just want to say thank you. Those are some few things that I can put forward. Over to you, Veronica.
Thank you all. Thank you for that elaborate explanation. I think one thing we failed to mention in the beginning is that GBV does not only happen maybe with the poorest of the poorest, it even happens in the richest homes we know. But and that's why I brought up the issue of prevention, because if we're having more messages out there that is condoning the behavior, then perhaps we might be able to do something. There's this advert on Miraya FM. It's about the weird part about this advert is I always ask myself, why did it have to be a Muzungu to read out this advert and, not a South Sudanese? She's talking about how to be careful, when you find yourself alone in the office in the late hours. It's basically cautioning you against gender-based violence. And like now we're in the office, and then majority of the people here are men, and I'm thinking, when I'm walking out, am I going to be safe? So my understanding is that we should have, in the office, we should have these posters. They should be in our faces. We should read them, that it is wrong to assault somebody. We should have them in the schools. We should have them posted around schools so children know that it is wrong even just to fight, because that's how it starts. It starts with bullying. You bully a boy, the next thing you're bullying a girl, and it escalates. So I feel we need to do more in terms of that. Yes, you have mentioned, and Susie has mentioned that there's been a bit of effort in terms of policies, but often I see these policies end up in those offices where they're kept. We do not hear about them unless maybe now we have a week or two of 16 days of activism. That's when people are going to come out and pronounce them. But then the rest of the days, nobody's talking about it. And these things continue happening. So perhaps we need to do a little bit more sometimes.
Veronica, just a little
Yeah.
addition to what you're saying. I totally agree with you. And one thing that probably Wall and I have missed out on in our responses is looking at GBV in the context of conflict. Because if we look at South Sudan, we've just come out of conflict now, and there's a lot of GBV that happened during the conflict period. So most of the victims and survivors, they do not know where to go to access their justice. They do not know what to do, because when the violence happened to them, it was a wide-scale violence. It was like a village was attacked, people were raped, you don't know who did this. So what happens when we have such victims? Because they are also survivors of GBV, and we haven't much talked about that. So maybe if you would allow me just to shed a little light on that, I'll talk about probably the transitional justice mechanisms that are available provided by the Revitalized Peace Agreement. And one of the most important transitional justice mechanism to deal with such wide-scale rape, you had previously said that there are times when SGBV is used as a weapon of war, when we just started. So in cases where people were raped in a mass rape, the only access to justice they have is what is provided for in the transitional justice mechanism, especially here in South Sudan, which incorporates a hybrid court. So if there is a hybrid court, perpetrators could be brought before these courts, and then they could access justice. But as it stands now, because we do not yet have this hybrid court, it's unfortunate that nothing can be done for them, apart from, of course, psychosocial support if they seek this kind of help. So there's a lot of sensitization that needs to go out, that victims of GBV that have stemmed from the conflict that just happened, they need to seek help, because psychologically, GBV in terms of rape, in terms of assault, is very, has a very negative impact in terms of your emotions, in terms of your psychological and your mindset. So if you need psychosocial help, you need professional help for you to stem out of it. Although justice or access to justice is a bit limited now, it is justice that is a bit delayed, but we hope that very soon or in the near future, it will be justice that has been awarded to them. So that is maybe something that we might have missed out in our outlook at how we are going to handle GBV, the preventions, what has been done already, and how what we are looking to do going forward. Yeah, so I hope I've kind of shed some little light to that aspect that I felt that we might have left out in our discussions just now. Over to you, Veronica.
Thank you, Susie, for that clarification. Now we're going to move to the
Susie,
next.
can I come in?
Yes, please, Amer, go on.
Now, Susie, like you asked something very important that why are we too much on response and not prevention, And I think Wall and Susan have captured a lot on that. But when you look at the issues of GBV, we, the people who are counseling, we are in the front lines. If someone comes to report a GBV, it's not something that has happened to them once or twice. It's something they have gone through the lifetime. So there is this aspect, like we are groomed. We grew up knowing that this is part of us, and we're not supposed to say something about it. So as like we are not doing a lot of response more than the prevention, we are picking up because where we came from as South Sudan and where we are now, we are picking up, we are doing advocacy, we are doing awareness. So in the process of doing all these things, that's when people are coming up now to realize, oh, okay. So for me to marry off my daughter when she's 15 is a gender-based violence, because they don't know. So people are just waking up to understanding what gender-based violence is. Like no one, like even four of us who are seated here today, like we don't go for counseling, for normal people, you have to go for counseling maybe once in a month or twice and all these things, for your mental health and learn other things, that you might be doing wrong and all these things. So when you look at gender-based violence and the awareness and how people perceive it in our communities, in our country, it's not that something that people know. And we're in that process of making people understand. Like if you call someone some name in the office, that is a gender-based violence. You are not supposed to say that. So people are coming to learn all these things. And in the process of creating awareness or doing the prevention, that's when the response is coming in. So it's the fact that people don't know gender-based violence. That's why it look like we are doing a lot of response than the prevention. I think that's what I can ask there.
Thank you, Amer, for that clarification. I would actually like to give an example. And up to today, it's still, I keep wondering about it. Some time back, I was having an issue with my husband. So we decided to have a family meeting. And in that family meeting, one of the relatives told my husband, if only you had slapped this woman, she wouldn't have gone as far as she had gone. And ever since that day, I've been traumatized. Every time I see this guy, I'm traumatized. So I think the truth is, yes, they do not know that it is wrong. So I'm hoping that I gather the courage one day to actually talk to this uncle and tell him, whatever you're suggesting to your son to do was totally wrong. I'm going to move to the next question. Amel, back to you. Mention the types of GBV, SGBV experience in South Sudan, and what are the consequences for the victims?
Okay, thank you again, Nigale, for that. Earlier on, I wrapped up a lot of things when I started speaking. So the type of GBV in South Sudan, there are so many, and most of them are coming up. So we have the main gender-based violence in South Sudan is child marriage. That's the one that we are all fighting off, and that's the one that we are now reporting, because that's what now people know, that child marriage is gender-based violence. It's a form of a gender-based violence, and people are reporting it a lot. So mostly child marriage is the main one in South Sudan. And as we are handling the hotline in Crown Dorman, we are receiving a lot of cases of child marriage. And we are doing a lot of community engagement, to negotiate with the families of the young girls. And we also have the second one is physical violence. As you said earlier, that your in-law was suggesting, someone should slap you. So being slapped in this country is not something that it's normal, you know, like when your woman do something and you love her, you need to punish her by beating her, which is a big form of gender-based violence, and it should not be done that way. And we have emotional violence. This year, and all of us can attest to this, there has been a lot of cases of suicide, especially to the male gender. And this is a big issue because the male people are not speaking up. You see, women, you know, I will see something that Susan is going through. I will tell her, or I will talk. I will go and report on behalf of Susan. But for men, they keep quiet with things, and you hear a lot of suicide. Suicide comes from emotional violence, and this is one form of violence that is very, very, very bad for all of us. Emotional, like we go through something that is not seen physically, but inside we are dying. You know, so we have harmful traditional practices like FGM. You know, child marriages come in, forced marriages come in. These are other form of gender-based violence that is really affecting our community today as South Sudan. We have denial of resources. Wall said earlier the issue of women not owning land. Well, so we have been having cases. You are a widow in this country, your husband is dead, you lose the property, you lose your own children. And these are resources. You know, these are the only thing you have as a woman. You are married as a housewife, you don't have anything. You only have your house and your husband and your children. Now the husband is taken by God, and your children and the land are taken by the community. You remain with nothing just because you are a woman. This is one form of gender violence that is hitting women, you know, who are critical in this country. So the consequences of gender-based violence to the country, it's like a cycle of poverty, you know. So once one person is suffering, it's going to affect the neighbor, it's going to affect the cousin, anyone who is related to them. And this effect goes all the way to the country, because there is someone who is traumatized, someone who might go like mad, you know, do not pay tax to the country. You know, you are not supportive in this country. You are not helping the country. So the effects and the consequences of gender-based violence go around. So you might think that it belongs only to that family, but it's affecting all of you, because when one person is suffering, the consequences just go like round affecting the community. But with the individual, there are things like permanent disabilities. There are some people who are beaten, and like you hear women or men who are beaten by their partners, they cut their hands or the leg or the eye, you know, so you get that permanent disability. There are issues of death. You know, someone beat someone to death. We have heard recently in Lake State, a young lady was beaten by the brothers because she refused to get married, and she was beaten to death. So now you would ask yourself, where is the dowry that you're beating this woman? Will you get the dowry because she's dead, and the other man will take his dowry and go and marry the other one? You know, there are issues of psychological issues, like the mental issue come in. You are not okay anymore because what you have gone through is traumatizing and it's not healed. Like it take a long time for a survivor to heal, and there are health related problems. So mostly when it comes to rape cases, and rape as a form of gender-based violence. So issues, let's say this girl, for them to be to maybe give birth, you know, and have a normal family become an issue. So those are some of the things that I can add. If the rest have something to put on, they can add on those consequences. Yeah.
I would actually like to jump to Wall. There was something you mentioned earlier on, Amer. In the beginning, you said that men do not report cases. And I would just like to ask Wall this, being the only male in this group. Why are men not reporting cases of GBV? Wall, over
Thank
to
you so
you.
much. I can hear you. I can hear you. Thank you so much, Veronica and Ahmed. I think this is a very, very important question. To me, there is only one reason: our cultures, the lacked cultures that and our social norms. Most of our cultures say a man is supposed to be superior. It's supposed to be very strong. You're not supposed to be shaken by small things. And to me, this moved down to the reason why we have gender-based violence the way we have now in our country. Men, as a man, like myself, to me, maybe to go to a woman or to go to a psychiatric or psychologist and report that I have that and that looks as a sign of weakness. And I think that is where we should start to preach and to aware and to educate men uh, on issues like this. And we at the UN Women have started this. We have a project in WOW and also in Juba that looks at social norms and then educate the people on the right norms and the bad norms and how we can move away from bad norms to good norms. Sometimes we think that this is just something that can happen overnight. Sometimes you feel frustrated. I know a mayor who is someone that is dealing with cases will testify. When you have so many cases, you really feel like giving up. Like this is not supposed to be like this, and it is a lot of work and all that. But something comes telling us we have to come back and do and serve our country. And for that reason, I really think our cultures are the key reason, and the way we are brought up from uh, from birth, the way you are brought up as a man compared to the way women are brought up is totally different. And for that reason, we have a number of men who don't. Actually, some men thinks you are not supposed to laugh with a woman. You're not supposed to interact with a woman. Uh, and these are things that are real, and we have to do something about it. We have seen in the masculinity report, UN Women did the masculinity studies, and these issues came out very, very strongly, and now we are trying to respond through those key issues that I highlighted. So I think that could be it, colleagues. Maybe you can pretend to be a man and see what could be the reason. But yeah, I think that's it from me. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you all. Definitely. I would also recall, or if you see kids playing, often you'll find somebody saying, oh, he has been beaten by a girl. So it really, I think it affects the boy child. So he grows up with this thing of a girl is not supposed to beat me. But we often forget that it's beyond the violence, the physical violence. There is the mental element of it. Let me say, if I'm stressing my husband so much, he has the right to go to a counselor and get some counseling and try to sort it out. I think that has nothing to do with whether he's strong or not. Instead, most times, if you find that I'm being a stressful wife, then he's going to become physical, as opposed to finding help for the mental issue that I'm causing him. So yes, our communities, our societies will have a long way to go in terms of dealing with the issues to do with assault and violence and the like. Anybody wants to add something? Okay, Susie, over to you. What can be done to encourage communities to take GBV as a criminal act? And tell us, have you faced any challenges while handling, as a lawyer, while handling cases of GBV, if you've ever handled any, or if you've heard of anybody who's handling GBV cases and then, they're facing all sorts of violence or resistance from the community? Over to you.
Okay, so maybe we talk about the background a little bit. So most of the GBV cases that we find in South Sudan here stem from our cultures, they stem from our traditions and our way of living. So we find that many people, or many women and men, they go through gender-based violence in one way or another, but they do not recognize it as gender-based violence. So the first thing to do is to do a sensitization. There's already much that is being done, but whatever is being done is not enough. South Sudan is very big. The level of trauma, the level of violence that has already happened is in large scale. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. We need professionals out there to do a lot of sensitization on what is and what is not violence. But when we are doing this, we do not go out and say South Sudanese culture or this specific culture is bad, because people love their culture, people identify with their culture and traditions. So the direction that we need to take is go out there and tell them culture is good, but there are these specific aspects of our culture that are not good. There are these specific aspects of our culture that we need to change, because if we change them, it will have a positive impact cross-generational for a very long time. Our society will be able to grow. Instead of taking the approach of telling them culture is bad, we do not want culture, we are now modernized, we need to follow what we are being told after getting a certain level of education. Nobody is going to accept that, because the massive population in South Sudan are not the literate, are not the learned. It is the illiterate, it is the populations that are in the village, it is the populations that stick so hard to culture. And that is why when handling GBV cases, we find that most people would come to you because they want the psychosocial support. So when we are dealing with GBV cases, we deal with the referral pathway, because it's important that you do cut it in a multifaceted way. There is the psychosocial support that they need. There is the legal aid that they need. There is the justice system that they need to access. They also need to access the police, and they also need to file their cases, and they need to know that they have a right to even access medical care if it is violent. So it's a multifaceted approach that is taken here. But you find that once somebody comes to you, you use the referral pathway, you take them for psychosocial support, you take them to the hospital, you take them to the police. Later on, you tell them you have a right to sue the person who caused you this trouble. Or you have a right, you tell them the available justice mechanisms that are there. Of course, you will not keep quiet and say, because I do not personally support our traditional justice system, I will not tell the survivor about the traditional justice system. I will tell them. I'll tell them you have the traditional justice system that you can go to, but you have also the civil justice system, you can file a civil suit, and additionally, you can take the person for criminal, you can place criminal charges against this person because this is a crime. But most of the time, they sit down and they evaluate it, and they look at the stigmatization that is done in the society, and they rather keep the matter secret, or they rather use the traditional justice mechanism that focuses at the family level, so that the information doesn't go out. So there's a lot of professionalism that is required when handling GBV cases, so that we can stop stigmatization, because stigmatization is one of the reasons why people don't come forward. If you come forward with a case and say my daughter was raped, the probability that they will be like, oh, the person who raped my daughter must be held accountable will be low. Most people will come and tell you, why did you go and announce your daughter was raped? Now your daughter is not going to get married. You look at the mindset that our people have. So instead, since we already know that this is the mindset, then we need to look for ways of dealing with it. And that is where sensitization comes in. Thirdly, we also need to look at what I mentioned earlier, the widespread violence that happened during the crisis. And not only this crisis, the many years of war, and nothing has been done about it. We haven't sat down as a country and done what is called a healing process for everybody. I think South Sudanese generally are all traumatized, and we all need to go through some level of counseling. And that needs to be availed to every single person who has gone through a traumatic experience, such as war. So some of them have experienced this violence at one point of their time. Most women have experienced some form of violence at one point of their life here in South Sudan. So everybody needs to have that access to, they need to have access to psychosocial support. They need to be told that even if justice it cannot be accessed at this moment, they can get some form of help. They need to be helped to live, to continue with their life normally. Because at the end of the day, because of the trauma, people, we end up having people that are living their life recklessly because they no longer care. They have lost the emotional touch because of the scars that were, done to them. So that is one thing that we also need to look at. A blanket form of psychosocial support for everybody who's gone through some form of violence, and that includes all of us, even us that are dealing with cases of GBV. We also need to go through some sort of psychosocial support in one point or another, because these cases are traumatizing. For you to know that a mother, a sister like yourself is going through hell like this, it can be traumatizing on you, and it can blur your vision, it can blur your judgment. So you also need to go through psychosocial support, because GBV cases are very sensitive. And you can start a case, you reach halfway, and the survivor pulls out and says, no, I'm not willing to put charges against my husband. That brings me to the next topic, which is intimate partner violence. And how do you hold husbands or partners or boyfriends responsible or accountable for violence that they cause on their girlfriends, on their spouses, on all that? Because at this country, most of the married couples keep quiet with the trauma that they are going through. If they place charges, there's a lot that is involved because of the nature of our marriages, or there's dowry that is going to be paid, or there's, for example, I can give you an example in one of our cultures. Like, for example, if a lady, for one reason or another, does not want to have sexual relationships with her husband, there is a fine that she has to pay. The husband can go and report the matter, and you will be charged, you will be fined, you will be held responsible, you will be beaten up. Something is going to happen. Gross kind of repercussions are going to come. Yet, as a woman, you have a right to decide whether you want or you don't want, but you're not given that right. So women are going through hell in their marriages, and they cannot stand up for it. And why? Because one, they love their husbands. Two, they respect their culture. So there's a lot of sensitization again that needs to be done with regards to this. And women need to learn not to keep quiet with their problems. Even the worst of them all is people who've gone to school, who are educated, who are informed, but they still choose to keep quiet and endure it all in their marriages. Because for one reason or another, they underwent a traditional marriage, and marriage is not a civil union between two. It involves families. So the implication is huge. Before you can divorce, or before you can seek justice against a perpetrator, you would have gone through hell. So that is why people don't seem to want to come to us to seek justice. All they want is to get some kind of assistance to help them move along with their lives. So we are not going to stop them from coming to us for help. They should come, but we should do more sensitization on what happens after you have recovered. We need to have a deterrent in place so that people can learn from the experiences. If me, Susan, my husband mistreats me, and I go out there on a live video like this, and I say, you people, I am done with my marriage. My husband has not treated me very well. I need women that are going through the same thing like me. They should stand up for themselves. What do you think is going to happen? The kind of backlash that I'm going to get from the entire society is going to make me regret the day I left my husband, you see? So there's a lot that is involved here. And it starts with us. It starts with the sensitization from us. We should stop attacking each other. Even us women, we are our biggest enemy. We are our biggest enemy. We start by saying, why our mothers endured so much. Why don't we have the same level of tolerance? Oh, so and so is a very strong person because she has survived all the beatings that her husband has given her. No, I am not going to sit down and watch and tell a sister that you are strong because you are enduring beating from your husband. No, that is not strength. That is not strength. These are the kind of perceptions that we need to change in our community. Let me not talk too much. We will spend the whole day here. Over to you, Veronica.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susie. I don't think I want to add anything because I think you have spoken to our souls. You have spoken the truth. If there are ears out there listening, I hope they have heard. Yeah. And Wall, over to you. My next question goes to you. Please explain the extent to which the UN or any other international body can hold the government accountable for cases of, especially SGBV. Earlier on, Susie mentioned that there is a lot of sexual-based violence that happened during the 2013 and 2014 conflict, and not so many people got justice for that. So I just wanted to hear from you. Has the international community got a say in this? If they do, how? Can they hold our government accountable for actually the pain that these women have gone through during the 2013 and 2016 conflict and any other violence that took place in this country? Over to you all.
Well, thank you so much, Veronica. First, I want to say that SGBV, or conflict-related sexual violence, is not a national issue. It is a global issue because of the 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 way it emulates women, the way it affects the dignity of women. It turns out to be a human rights issue, and for that reason, you have seen a lot of times UN international organization coming in to talk about gender-based violence and sexual-related conflict, sexual-related violence. And this is not the first time to hear about this in South Sudan. We have seen it in other countries. You have seen what happened in Rwanda, where later on the regional bodies and the international organization came in and they actually held the government accountable for the actions. It can be through justice in whatever form, whether it is retributive justice or a criminal justice. It doesn't matter. So there are ways in which the UN and the international organization can hold government accountable. And this can be done through the legal instruments that international bodies use to ensure that the local laws are in line with the international laws, and laws that doesn't conform to the international laws are reviewed. So, for instance, on the cause of women fight against gender-based violence, we have heard of things like CEDAW, Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. You have heard about the Maputo Protocol. You have heard about the Beijing Platform for Action. All these are instruments that are meant to protect women all across the globe. And if I can take you back, on 3rd September 2014, South Sudan ratified CEDAW. And my question, which is actually supposed to be the real question here, is what does it mean when a country ratify an international instrument? Maybe just to take you back a little bit to that. What it means here is that the country is now binding to the articles and all the elements of the laws. Should anything happen, that government must be held accountable by the regional bodies. And so South Sudan, being a member to such laws, automatically must conform to the international instrument, must conform to human rights, and failure to do so, there has to be consequences. And the consequences can be anything, whether you have heard of sanctions, you have heard of a situation where government officials are actually arrested, and all those kind of things. So when you are able now to rectify a international law or international instrument or framework, the UN and international organization now uses these structures to educate, to coordinate, and to advocate to the government and to the citizens of that country. And when the government, who is actually a signatory or has ratified an instrument, failed, then there has to be what we call litigation. Whether, unfortunately, I'm not a lawyer, but these are things that we know on our daily work. Susan, who is a lawyer here, can testify. There has to be a litigation, and that litigation will then come down to the responsible governments, to the responsible institution, and that they must conform and they must be held accountable for the actions. So we are not saying that UN can just come anytime, or regional bodies can just come anytime to arrest anyone, but there has to be procedures that are followed. And I think what is important here is not to look far away. If you see your mother being beaten, or if your mother is beaten to death, I don't think whether anybody can, whether you're a man or a woman, you will be happy. And that should be our binding point here, where all of us should come and understand that gender-based violence is not just about the name, but the realities of an outcome of it affects each and every one of us, whether you're a man or you're a woman. So that's it from me. Maybe colleagues, you can ask something.
Igale,
Thank you.
maybe I could add something small to what Wal was saying. With regards to international police, international standards, and how they can be used to hold national governments accountable, it's with regard to the nature. When we look at the nature of GBV, there are some of the cases that really they fall under domestic law. They are governed by the laws of the land. But we also have international standards, international human rights standards that our country has signed some of these documents. But we need to move from signing or ratifying these international instruments to actually domesticating this document, if you understand what I mean. So by domesticating these documents, it means that the actual provisions of the document are incorporated and become part of our laws here in South Sudan. And so even in our domestic courts, they can be referred to when we are trying to access justice for victims. So when we are talking about, for example, the wide-scale rape that happened, so how do you hold such people accountable? Because rape is an instrument of war. It's a war crime. So how do you hold these people accountable? First of all, within our domestic laws, there is something that is called a command control rule. When we talk about this command control rule, if an army is sent to a specific place to attack a specific location, and they go and diverge and they go and rape and do other crimes that are against international human rights law, which include things like rape, then the person that was in command of that specific battalion or that specific group is held responsible for the actions of those peers, because they were given instructions: go out, do this and do that. And the way the military is designed, it's in such a way that you take commands, you take instructions. So if you do not have control over your soldiers and they go out there and they misbehave and they do something wrong that was not part of their plan, you will be held accountable for it. And the line of command goes high and high and high until you hold everybody accountable in one way or another for either failing to prevent the crime or providing an instruction or a directive to the foot soldiers to conduct the crime. And if the foot soldiers did the crime on their own, then they must prove, the leadership must prove that they told these people not to, and these people on their own went out and did it, and they must be individually held liable. If you've seen, there are cases that have happened before, like the Terrain case, if you know the Terrain case very well. What happened was that the people who actually, the perpetrators, they were taken to court. And to some extent, there was some kind of justice because they were found guilty. And what happened to the justice system? The justice system, these people were soldiers. Their ranks were taken off, and they were allowed to be civilians, and they were tried as civilians. And so there was a form of justice that was done. People were held accountable. So international standards can be used to put pressure on our national systems to administer justice. And if they fail to administer justice or to put measures in place to prevent large-scale GBV cases, then they will be held accountable through the international courts. There is what we call, for example, South Sudan was told, if you do not have a hybrid court in place, then matters that dealt with that issues that arose from the conflict, people will be taken to the ICC. But because we want to deal with our issues nationally, then we have to have the hybrid court. And through the hybrid court, some of these cases will be dealt with. And that is what the IGAD what the international community is doing to directly ensure that the citizens of this country get some form of justice for the crimes that were done. But it's very much important for us to understand the personal nature of these crimes. It is very difficult to take one individual to the ICC because of one rape case that is totally isolated from another. It is very difficult. So most of these cases are usually dealt with at the national level. Thank you so much. I think that's all from me.
Thank you all, and thank you, Susie. Definitely, I think because these things they've been happening repeatedly, and obviously, like you said, we need to go beyond the signing and the ratifying. We need to start doing something. This aspect you brought forward, the concept of the command responsibility, I think that's not being taken care of, because if that was happening, I think by now we'll have some people actually brought to justice. Brought to book to answer for the crimes that have been committed during conflict, especially. And then this whole, I do not want to make this political, but I think other countries, the UN or other organizations, the AU, they have the responsibility to protect in situations where now our government is unwilling to do anything. I think that's when now these institutions or other countries come in to try to help these victims. Like I said, I do not want to take this further because it might get political. I'm going to move to Amer. Amer, are you with us? Yes. Can you please tell us, earlier on it was mentioned that in our communities, there's a lot of victimization and stigma, especially to victims. You report a case, you're being stigmatized not only by your family members, even by the police themselves. So how can we support? There are a few of us who'd like to learn, how can we support victims of GBV, especially in scenarios where there is no GBV actor, like in case you're not there and I'm faced with a GBV survivor, what are the steps that I can take to help this person? Over to you, Amer.
Thank you, Igale. So when you see a GBV, and when you look the context of South Sudan, we don't need professionals to carry it out for us. We need ourselves as community members. So one thing we need to really do, and it's what is coming out of the question here. Igale, when you call them victim, I feel bad because to me they are survivors, they are not victims.
Survivors, my apologies, survivors.
Yes. So when you look at survivors, it is not their fault. Let's start from there. They did not ask for any of that thing that has happened to them to happen. They are survivors. Whatever they have gone through, it is done to them without their consent. It's not on their will, for them to suffer. It's not on anyone's will in this country or in this world to be raped. You don't decide. It just happened. So let's stop stigmatizing these issues. When the survivor is raped and then the police will ask you, but what were you putting on? And where were you at that time? Why were you out in that place? You are not supposed to be there. So I think one thing we should do as a community, first of all, let's stop stigmatizing these issues of gender-based violence and let's support survivors where we can. We don't need professionals to do this for us. The people who are supposed to do it in the community are the elders, mostly elders, mothers. And today I'm seated here and I'm wondering, there are some mothers who have just taken it to the extent that it is normal for someone to suffer. So when you are a daughter, you are being abused by your husband and you go to them and they say, all families are like that, just stay like that, So parents, and women figures in the community, we need to step up strong and support survivors of gender-based violence. The churches, because before we had counselors and all these people, we used to take our issues to church because you cry to God and the church is there in a community. All communities has their ways of worshiping. even not the church, but we used to have ways of worshiping. And these are places where to go. But these days you will hear a church telling you, Christ died for the church, you should also persevere and all these things. But the church is the best place in the community to handle the issues of gender-based violence, because it's bring communities together, it's bring families together, and the family members themselves, you are in this family and someone is suffering, don't keep quiet with it, talk about it, bring someone to justice, call the name out so that someone can take accountability, take action, let someone be accountable for what they have done and serve justice for the survivor. Sometimes we have women groups in the communities, when they have their small sanduk in Arabic, the small sanduk they have. So there, when they are meeting, they can talk about this issue. So and so daughter is going through so and so, or my husband is beating me. So this one, you can get ideas on how you can come out and support each other before even we respond to them. By the time we are responding to them, we are just creating awareness on what they can do. We are providing psychosocial support. Susan said it so many times. This country we are living in, it's called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We are all with that because some of us are born with it, and some of us have seen all these things that we have gone through. So we need to support each other. So when we go there, and I think mostly what we can do as NGOs, international NGOs, the government, the community, we need to counsel people. Whenever you meet someone somewhere traumatized, all those things, just counsel in the middle of the road, or you are walking, just do counseling to someone next to you. By this, you will create a mindset of change to that person and help them come out, because the issues of GBV, when we are keeping quiet with them, that's when they hurt most. But when we speak about them, we heal. There is a lot of healing when they are let out, because emotionally you are free from inside. I think that's what I can add on that, Igal.
Thank you very much, Amel. I'm going to move right ahead to the next question that goes to Susie. Susie, I'd like you to take us through the legal steps for reporting a GBV case in South Sudan. Over to you, Susie.
Okay. Thank you, Veronica. When we are talking about a GBV case here, let's take the example of rape. Okay. So once rape or maybe assault or battery happens, that falls under GBV, physical GBV. It is important that the matter is reported to the nearest police station as soon as practically possible. So it's also important that you report the matter so that evidence is preserved. So let's say you are beaten. The way you are dressed, if you have a scar, if you are bleeding, whatever it is, that specific way that you are, it is important that you have evidence. This evidence includes the dress, don't wash these clothes. Secondly, it will include photos of yourself, the way you are when the incident happened, if you have access to that. It will involve witnesses who saw you the way you are after the incident happened. So those are some of the evidence that needs to be preserved, and that is why you need to go to the police station as fast as possible. The way that the legal system is designed is that there is a requirement for there is a form that needs to be given from the police for you to be able to access treatment at hospitals if you are a victim of any form of violence per se. This form is done in such a way that in case you succumb or something happens to you because of the injuries, then they can be able to have a police file there, and they can be able to follow up with the perpetrator and hold them accountable. Although these forms have sometimes become hindrances, because if you cannot access the form, then you cannot afford access medical treatment. Then it becomes an obstacle, because now you will have to suffer and live with and endure the repercussions of the incidents for a much longer time as you would want to. So most of the time, when you go to the police station, because there's a lot of sensitization that has happened with the police, they will record your statement and they will take the statements of your victims. Thereafter, they will give you a medical form, and they will take you, the medical form, you will take it to a medical doctor who will examine you. If you are raped, the medical doctor will then give you the PEP, the post-exposure prophylaxis, and this is essential because it is very important. It helps in preventing the contraction of HIV/AIDS. So in that way, you would have gotten some form of medical attention, and then from there, the medical report that has been given will be able to be used and adduced in court as evidence. After that, the case is referred to the public prosecutor. The public prosecutor there will spearhead the matter and ensure that this file comes before and is placed before a judge. Okay, and it will also determine whether this is a criminal matter or it is a civil matter. That is for the public prosecutor to do. Although most of these cases are usually tried under criminal law, you could also try it under civil law, but you need to first go under criminal law to seek for justice for this person needs to be put in jail, imprisoned for the act that they have done, and then you also need to ask in a civil suit for compensation for the physical harm that they have done to you, for the psychological torture that they have put you through, which is usually in form of some monetary sum. So both cases can be done. So you need to talk nicely to your lawyer or to the person providing legal aid so that they can provide you with the legal advice that is very much needed. After that, the victim is also allowed to decide whether they are going to go to court or they're going to handle the matter using the traditional system. Sometimes in some rare incidences, you can come across a very biased or uncooperative police at the station. In case this happens, it's important that you understand that this police can also be held accountable. So do not give up because you found that there is a police officer that is not cooperating. You can go to another police station. You can seek advice from many organizations, national NGOs, international NGOs that are operating here that will support your case. Do not give up on justice just because you went to one police station and they failed to attend to you. There are many other police stations, and there is support that is available to survivors and to victims of GBV and SGBV. So you need to seek you need to look in the right places for the right information. If you find that you are no longer able to go home, your home is no longer safe for you, we have UNFPA that they provide some form of shelters. They look into ways of helping you. So you need to speak up so that you can be able to have access to a safe home for a specific period of time until such a time that your situation has become normalized. Maybe you find a relative that you're going to stay with, or you're taken back to your parents, or the matter is discussed out of court or in court until you find an applicable solution that you yourself will spearhead. So we also look at situations that have arose where the person that is the perpetrator is a member or is a security personnel, or maybe is a court clerk, or maybe is a judge, or maybe is a government official with immunity. What do you do? Most of the time, people are intimidated and they fail to report. But that is not the case. You need to know that there is nobody that is above the law. So if the person has immunity, the immunity can be waived if they have been involved in a criminal act, and they can be held accountable. If there is obstruction to justice, you can always appeal and review and have the case reseen and readjusted, or even the case can be moved to another judge. So never give up on justice because there are mechanisms that are available to you. Do advocacy. Let your matter be known, so that you can be able to access justice. People will feel, once word is out there in the media everywhere that there is a case like this, and somebody is trying to obstruct justice, there'll be a lot of noise, and not to call it noise, but to call it good advocacy that will push for your case to be heard. And which is something that we need to learn to do collectively. If you hear that a sister has a case and the case is going down low, without mentioning the names, you can mention the facts and put pressure on the government, on the justice system, to ensure that justice is served. And there are many ways of doing that. So it is also very important that, sorry? Yes. So these are when we are dealing with issues that are of GBV related, and this is how we look at. This is how the legal procedure is. This is how the American agree with me, because I'm pretty sure she does the psychosocial support part of it. So it's a multifaceted approach. So apart from that, Amel had also mentioned that there are many other forms of violence of GBV that happen, and some of these GBV do not have to go through a legal process. They go through a community engagement process. They go through a community transformation process. For example, they go through policies. It's a long-term strategy. So it's not something that will just go away today. It needs a lot of advocacy. It needs a lot of time, and it needs a societal transformation. Societal transformation doesn't happen in one day. It takes a lot of time. So I think I've looked at the legal procedures, and anybody who's listening to me and would have gone through the process or knows somebody that is subjected to GBV in any way, at least has the basic information that they would need if they have to report a case on GBV. Thank you very much. Unless there's somebody who wants to add more. Over to you, Veronica.
Yes, please, Amel. You wanted to say something?
Yes, I have a concern on the issue of birth certificate. I have handled a lot of cases, and birth certificate is being used, by the defense lawyers. You know this girl maybe it's maybe 16, or the perpetrator himself. He's maybe someone of 20 or 25 there, and then they say no, they're all. There is that case when the survivor and the perpetrators are underage. And in this country, we don't have birth certificate, most of us. So the issue of birth certificate, there is that part where you do not seek justice to the survivors because there is no proper documentation when it comes to the issue of birth certificate, Susan. So I wanted to know more because I have really felt that pain of survivors coming out, and they're being pressed because the perpetrator is saying, oh, this one is not a child, they're over 18. Or, when it's a rape case, for example, the way you put it, and then the perpetrator goes to the family and negotiate with the family and told the family, hey, you know what, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you some money. So what you just go and tell the authorities is that your daughter is not underage and she's 18. And, you can agree and disagree on something, and then they are paid off. And then we have nothing to do there as maybe the people are providing psychosocial support and the legal people, our hands are tied. I just really need to understand that aspect, Susan.
Okay. When it comes to age assessments, because I think you're referring to the assessment of age that is usually done for most of us here in South Sudan. Unfortunately, like in any other country, some of our systems are corrupted. But if the legal procedure with regard to assessment of age is followed, the assessment of age are usually very much closer to the actual age of the individual. So you find that there is a way that they do assessment of age through X-rays, and they can be able to determine the exact age of somebody by how the bones, fix themselves. That's a medical procedure, and that is something that why assessments of age are actually done by the medical commission, why it's a doctor that has to do the medical the assessment of age. But right now, as it stands in South Sudan, you go there, you want to get an assessment of age, nobody does an X-ray. They just look at you like this and they say this one could be around this age, full stop. Okay, so that one is subject to abuse because any person who is 15 and looks 18 will just, they will be given what? A document for an 18-year-old. But the fact that the actual age of a survivor is in question, the fact that it is not beyond reasonable doubt that this person is above 18, that is enough room for somebody to be held accountable for having sexual relations with a child. Because the reason why they go very much for assessment of age is to negate the element of consent. Okay? If the victim or the survivor is above the age of 18, that means that they can consent to having sexual relationships. So the perpetrator can claim that so and so accepted, they were willing. But if the child is below the age of 18, then a child cannot give consent to sexual relation. And even the assumption that the fact that you assume that this person or this victim is, or this survivor is above the age of 18 is not proof enough. Okay, so it is easier to prove a case when the victim is a child as opposed as to prove a case when the victim is an adult. But this does not mean that somebody can give up on their cases because of assessment of age or because of lack of birth certificate. That should not be the case. Whether the victim is above the age of 18 or below the age of 18, the fact that rape happened is in itself a crime. So age here does not necessarily matter. Age is an important factor, but even if you are not able to prove age, still, if you're able to prove that rape happened, whether it is an old woman, it is a 30-year-old, it's a 40-year, as long as you're able to prove that rape happened, the perpetrator needs to be held accountable. With regard to people going side, having discussion, confusing the case, that is the nature of the justice system here. There's a lot of corruption everywhere. That includes in the justice system. But for a victim and for people that are that are in the front line or in dealing with this, you need to look for creative and innovative ways of making sure that justice has been gotten for your survivor or for your victim. So you don't give up on a case just because the family have done something. You focus on the victim here. You need to have a survivor-centered or a victim-centered approach. Forget about the family, because the family are biased. Some of them need dowry to be paid because their girl has been spoiled. They can no longer get the money that they were going to get. There is a certain interest that they have. Some of them want to protect the reputation of their community or the reputation of their family, so they don't want the case to go out. All these things, what does it do? It gives the perpetrator an upper hand, and it makes justice inaccessible to the victim and the survivor. So let's focus on a survivor-centered or a victim-centered approach when we are dealing with these cases. I understand it is very difficult, and there is a lot of challenges that arise when you're dealing with these cases, but let's not give up. Let's keep trying. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amer and Susan. I hope Amer Susan has helped you a little bit. Have you understood, or are you still having a challenge? Amer, are we clear on what Susan said?
Yes, very clear.
Okay. Okay. We're running out of time, so I'll just move right straight to the next question, and it's going to Wall. Wall, would you please help us understand, are there challenges that the government is facing, whether state or national government, in terms of when it comes to eliminating violence against women and children? And what are your recommendations moving forward?
Thank you so much, Veronica. I think this discussion is really getting interesting, and I just feel like we really need to move a lot, maybe to 2 hours, but I know we can't do that. There are a lot of challenges that the government is facing, and one of them, I will say, our social norms, our traditional norms, our cultures. I know someone is just there out now saying, why are these people discussing issues that are of the white man? I have heard that a lot of times, where people think gender-based violence is a white man thing, and it is not ours as African or as South Sudanese. This is in the mind of a lot of people. One of good example that I can give is when I posted on my timeline the advert for this discussion. A young man said that the day you will have this discussion is the day I will beat my wife. You can imagine the kind of understanding that we still have. And to me, I don't blame him. It is not his fault completely. It is just that it is the way that we are brought up. And anything that affects the society automatically becomes a problem of the government. How best can a government address uh, uh, negative social norms, uh, toxic masculinities within our societies? That is a very big question, and it is an issue that, to me, I think is a big challenge to that the government has to deal with, because ensuring that women are empowered, women equality, and women participation is not just about NGOs or UN or international organization. It has to be a program for the government. And government has to have certain plans to ensure that this is improved. The second challenge that all of us have seen is the finances. We have seen the ministries, the way, especially after the 2013 crisis. You have seen the way our ministries, the Ministry of Gender, who is supposed to lead the fight against gender-based violence. We have seen the way the government is bankrupt. Currently, we are in a situation where the ministry is depending on the donors, on the aids, on international organization, which is not supposed to be the case. It is time women and women organization and civil society actors should come out clearly and tell the government, look, you have to invest in ensuring that women are supported and empowered. It is not that we don't have money. We have billions of dollars. But does the government prioritize women empowerment? We have seen money going to defense. We have seen money going to security sector. And little is going to the development. And when I talk about the development, women empowerment should be number one. You have to support women to come to the level where men are, to have a voice in the society. So I think finances is a huge problem and a huge challenge that the government is facing, and that cannot just end there. We have to talk about accountability and transparency. The little money that the government is getting and investing in the ministries to fight gender-based violence, how are they accounted for? How are they managed? Should be a good question that we have to deal with, and we cannot keep quiet about that. We have to talk about it going forward. The third challenge to me is the civic awareness, the civic education. Now, if you go to the villages and you tell someone you are not allowed as a man to beat your wife, someone will look at you in a different way or even fight you. Because people still believe that if you pay 100 cows to marry your wife, she's already your property. You can do anything with her. I have my auntie who was killed by the husband, and because the guy paid huge number of heads of cattle, there was nothing that he was not he was not taken to any court. It was just some kind of communal discussion, and it ends there. He did not even pay a blood compensation because he believes he married her, and so the wife is his property. That is a huge challenge that I think the civil population must be aware that gender-based violence is a big problem, is a huge issue that societies have to deal with. And maybe I know there are a lot of challenges. I'm trying to highlight the most critical and the most important one. And maybe to say the last one are the discriminatory laws. We at UN Women, we did what we call the laws reviews. We hired a consultant who is a lawyer and go through a number of laws. And we have seen a lot of loopholes in the laws, a lot of issues that are not, a lot of loops that are actually used by the lawyers to escape punishment for perpetrators. And for that reason, I think that we really have to work on our laws as a nation to ensure that women issues are incorporated, women empowerment are incorporated into basic laws. When I talk about laws, I'm talking about a number of them: the Penal Code, the Constitution, the Child Act. All those laws and policies should be reviewed and ensure that they conform to the dignity of women and protection of women. So my recommendation, I know there are a number of them, but my recommendation, one is to invest in addressing the social norms. As simple as that. Go to the community, put resources, and talk to people. Let them talk, let them say things that they think they are, and then educate them and let them change. Because this is 21st century. We are not going to remain like this. We have to move forward. Whether we like it or not, we have to move forward. And for us to do that, it cannot happen just without an effort, without heroes and heroines that are actually investing a lot of time and working on that. And for that, we cannot do it without the resources, which I think is another area that I need to talk about, the finances. Government sincerely should invest in ensuring women empowerment is achieved in this country. Because if we are going to depend on the money that is coming from UN, from international community, from the World Bank, to be sincere, that money will never change the face to the level that we want it. I work for the UN, but I have to say the truth. We have to have our own money as a government, as a country, that is directed to the fight against gender-based violence. The money that is vetted by the parliament, the money that is known by the country, as because if women empowerment is not a national priority, we are not going anywhere. That is the sad truth. The first and the foremost is to ensure that our highest officers understand that we cannot move along without women. And if we cannot invest resources to ensure that women are educated and are aware, we are not going anywhere. Whether we see this work that is being done by the NGOs, this is just to support the government. But the main actor should be the government. And I think that is where we should put our efforts as humanitarian, as UN, as international organization, to push forward, to talk to the government that look, this is why it is important, and this is why you should invest in bringing up the women. I know there are efforts. I'm not saying that government is not doing anything, but we have to double those efforts and to ensure that women are supported financially. That could be women organizations. That could be investing money to the Ministry of Gender, and then Ministry of Gender will have social workers across the country investing on the training. If we have so many women like Amer who are doing case management, who are doing a lot of work with that expertise, then why do we think that we cannot achieve equality and reduce the women gender-based violence? We can do that. But you will find that maybe in the whole of let me say, wow, if you're lucky, you'll find maybe 2 or 3 case workers who have full knowledge of gender-based violence and how to deal with it. And do you think they can handle like that huge number of people? In Juba here, how many people live in Juba? And how many case workers do we have? These are the real issues that we have. And the turnover. You are trained as a social worker, you don't have access to resources. You leave and go and maybe do farming and do other things. So these are the issues that I think can be addressed. And then the awareness and education. Awareness should start from the beginning. We said earlier that boys and girls are brought up differently. For us to do that, we have to start from the beginning, and that is to say, our curriculum at primary level, our informal education at the household level. How do we bring up our children? That is where we have to start going forward. And to do that, we need to educate the parent, we need to educate ourselves, and we need to educate the entire community so that we are able to move forward. And lastly is, I know we are currently working on the permanent constitution. Susan must have a good knowledge on that. The constitution should be our basis. The permanent constitution should be our basis, where we have to come out clearly as advocates for women's rights and for human rights to ensure that this upcoming constitution should conform to the needs of women, to the needs of disabled, to the need of all other groups that are supposed to be supported. Because we have seen in a number of cases where constitution is not clear on in a number of articles or contradictory to certain articles. This is the way that we can address, and I think this should be the best way forward to ensure that we review our laws and going forward. I think those can be my reply to your questions, Veronica. My colleagues can support if there are things that I might have missed, but otherwise, thank you so much. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Wall. Definitely, we have seen in the past there was this scenario we had with the minister. I won't mention names here. I'm thinking that should have been a starting point for the government to do something. When something like that happens, the person perhaps needs to step down to pave way for investigation and everything else to take place. But we did not see that happen. Today, I just read on the page for this Women Intellectuals Forum page. There's also a similar scenario in Awil, I think, where a girl was raped, and this person who raped her actually works in the court. So he managed to influence the court process, and at the end, he's not guilty. And instead, now he's asking court to make this girl pay him for all the expenses he spent on this case. I think these are scenarios where the government needs to come in strongly, because a girl was raped, like Susan had said earlier on. A person is raped, a person is raped. So what you need to do is to protect that person, the survivor. So I feel there is a lot our government can do, and there is a lot we all as individuals can do. I'm going to move to Susan. Susan, this is last question to you. Why do you think GBV should be eliminated in our communities? And what role can the men play, especially the youth, in mitigating, preventing, and responding to GBV cases? And please, you give us your recommendations as well. Thank you. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you very much, Igale. I would say this. If you look at the workforce of every country, you need everybody on board, especially for a country like South Sudan to develop. We need to bring everyone on board. We need to create a safe environment where everybody can thrive. But as it stands, because of our culture, because of our social norms, women are left behind. Women become victims of GBV mostly. Although men have suffered, it's not in the same magnitude and it's not in the same scale as how women have suffered in terms of experiencing GBV. So it's important that, secondly, we note that in terms of population, women are above 50% of the population in this country. So if you have women and you have men having a safe environment to thrive in, and you have both of them contributing equally towards our economy, we have both of them working strongly to ensure that our society is transformed and our society is growing, the country as a whole, the community, and even individual families will be able to thrive. That is my first rationale as to why we should end GBV. Secondly, GBV, the physical aspect, it's not only affecting the victims or the survivors, it also affects the perpetrators. What goes through your mind to be this violent human being? It also affects generations. You might sit down and think to yourself, oh, I'm going to endure this for the sake of my children. Or the husband will say, I'm making sure my wife is disciplined for the sake of my children. Well, the children grow. They are watching this. What kind of generation are we bringing up? There's this one video I was watching the other day where the husband was beating the wife, and this man in front of his 3 children, and they are all boys. Do you know what the boys did? These are small boys, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. They also took a huge log as the dad was chasing the mom. They were chasing the dad. So the dad would hit the mom, and they would hit the dad. So you see, it's a cycle of violence that is now going. It's a generation that we are losing here because the cycle of violence is not going to come to an end. South Sudan has been experiencing a lot of crisis in terms of violence. If we want to reduce violence, it needs to start from the family setup. Show these children that violence is a go zone. Then we deal with the physical aspects of GBV. Then we move into the social aspects of GBV. We move into the economic aspects of GBV. And then we achieve gender equality. Once we achieve gender equality and there is equal environment for both men and women to thrive, we will be in a society that is thriving and is growing, and we will be able to see change. We will not rely so much on aid. We will be able to generate a source of livelihood for ourselves because we are empowered and because we have an environment where we can be able to achieve our dreams. That's one. Secondly, we need to bring men on board. We need to bring men on the table. It's important to have men on the table as well. This is because the perpetrators are mostly men, but we also have women who are perpetrators or women who provoke violence. So if we have both genders have a discussion and we work together towards eliminating GBV, then there's the possibility or the duration under which we will be able to eliminate GBV or discriminations against women, all forms of discriminations against women, and the objectives of CEDAW will be much, 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 much more faster. Thirdly, why we should involve the youth. As it stands, the youth are more than 70% of the population. The youth have learned a lot from the previous generation. Look at the crisis when we were at war. The youth were at the forefront. They were the ones who were fighting. The youth can be easily mobilized for the wrong. How about we exert the same effort in mobilizing the youth towards a good cause? Let's mobilize the youth to build a society that is transformative, to build a society that recognizes the role of women, and to build a society that and recognizes the fact that when both genders are at par, then even them, they can be able to thrive. Their homes will be much, much more better. The environment will be much, much more safer. And everybody will be happy. And we will all be able to live a productive life. So let's put also that in place. So we need to have the youth on board. We need to have men on board because as much as they are perpetrators, they also could be a very good voice for reason for fellow men who do not understand what is happening. And when in our society today, because of our cultural norms, we find that when a man speaks, his voice is louder. It's heard more than when a woman speaks. So for the time being, let's use that voice for a good cause. Okay? To these women that are yet to understand that their voice could be heard too, and they are focusing on hearing the voice of men, let's have them on board by using men, involving them to preach the gospel of gender equity, eliminating all forms of discrimination against women, and saying no to GBV. Those are my closing or parting notes. Thank you so much. Over to you, Igali.
Thank you so much, Susan. Mel, please, what role, excuse me, sorry. How has the male dominance of power relations reinforced GBV and SGBV in our communities? And how can we change these social norms and stereotypes? And please, you give us your recommendations as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Igale. Okay, so when we look at the male dominant in our societies, these are the people who are decision makers. They enforce every law in the community. So, for example, when you go to a community, most chiefs are male, and 1% of them are the women. So this has, and we said earlier, GBV is enforced because of the control of power and who is in charge and who has power over who. So this has enforced a lot of gender-based violence in the community because they are the superior. They have the voice. So they said when the man speaks, he's heard more than the other gender as compared to women. So male dominant has encourage a lot of GBV, I can say, in that like they hold power and they enforce law. And when you look at our cultures that we are calling bad today, they are not bad cultures. We have beautiful culture, but we decide to go with the one that favor the male dominant. Since you are a man and you are the one making the decision and the law, you are the one setting up the laws, so you make the one that favor you. And you are the one benefiting, because when you look the issues of dowries goes to our fathers, our brothers, because they will go and marry using the same dowry. When the elders sit, to discuss the issues of gender and the issues that are affecting maybe the community, that the table of discussion is full of men, so the domination in that top positions and top places in the community has encouraged a lot of gender-based violence. And this can be changed, because if we talk about our genders and our cultures, and we say our cultures are bad and we need to change them, we have to think twice, because if we go back to our cultures, those days, we have beautiful cultures as South Sudanese. Family planning was there. I usually say this, and people are like, how? Because those days you find a mother breastfeeding for 2 to 3 years. That was family planning. That's where the way of spacing, childbirth. Then there was no child marriages. Rape was a taboo. If rape happened in a community, there are songs that were sung, and you will feel ashamed, as a perpetrator. The perpetrator was so much given that attention, like, you did something wrong. But now it is the survivor that is being pointed handful, like, you did something wrong. Why were you raped in the first place? So we have beautiful cultures, and our social norms need to be changed, that we go back to our beautiful cultures and leave the bad one, because we are corrupting our cultures as the people. And this come up when we take power and position and leadership that favor us. We are only thinking ourselves. Since you are the male and you are the one in that position, you don't care what happened to the female. Yet it's affecting all of us, because Susan said clearly, if we don't have females in this country and we don't have the male coming together, we are not moving forward as a country, because development issues, women rights issues are human rights. So we need each other to develop as a country. So we need each other and support each other. So we need to change our mindset and come together and value everyone. We are human beings, and God created all of us for a purpose. So we need to value the male, we need to value the female, we need to value even the disabled people. They are able differently. So everyone is bringing something to the table of this country. So what I can encourage people is that, please let us speak us about these issues of gender-based violence. When you see something in your community, talk about it, call someone, report, face, be accountable in your communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amel. We definitely need to do a lot to do away with the issue of GBV in our community. It's not going to happen overnight, but it requires everybody's effort. It is everybody's responsibility. Another thing we need to do, I think, we need to straighten our laws, and we need to reconcile the civil law with our traditional laws. Our traditional laws are not all bad, like Amel said. There were times, or if we decide to look at them, actually, if we take more time to understand where those laws are coming from, at the end, they are not really as bad as they seem. It's because often our approach when we are trying to deal with these laws, we take the wrong approach. Again, we need to understand how to fit in this whole concept of human rights into our traditional laws, because it can't be that our traditional laws are so bad that it does not respect human rights, whether of women or of men and children. And we need to do a lot of sensitization this is this issue of GBV is serious. Now that we have seen that it is something that we have been bred, it has been bred in us. So we need to also take small steps to deal with this. And taking small step does not mean I'm lost for words. Taking small steps does not mean we're going to be fighting our traditional laws which are already in place. Taking small steps means understanding what we have in place and then trying to maybe find ways of how the two laws can live together. I believe that's possible because there are certain conflicts which are happening at the moment in our country that I feel only taking the traditional approach can solve these issues and not necessarily these new laws that have come into place. Thank you very much, Amer. Thank you all. Thank you, Susan, for being here with us. I would like to say thank you to everybody who has watched in, everybody who has listened to us. I hope you have learned a lot. I wish we had more time to say so much more that we wanted to say, but we're limited by time. But yes, thank you all, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much,